Members of the Artist Forge and communities, welcome back to the Artist Forge Live. I'm Nicole York. I'll be your host, and today with me are your wonderful co-hosts, moderators, and founders of the Artist Forge, Matt Stagliano, Becca Bjorky, and Bassam Saba. Kat cannot be with us today. She is doing amazing things in Italy, but it is her birthday. So everybody raise one, whatever you got. If you have water, raise that too. For the lovely Kat, our mistress of madness. We love her. We wish she was here. Happy birthday, Kat.
Happy birthday.
All right. So Becca has already tried to opt out of this one, but I'm not going to let it happen. On Monday, we talked about letting go of the illusion of control. And I am super interested to hear. I know that was a difficult discussion because it forces us to think about how much control we actually can exert over our artistic careers. And how much we can't. So that's a struggle. And I had to talk about it with you guys because it's been a struggle on my mind forever. But we're going to discuss that in a minute. First, we will say hi to our friends in the audience. We're so excited you're joining us today. Sharon is with us. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
And she says, happy birthday to Kat. We wish Kat was here. If you are in the audience today, make sure you leave us a comment and say hi. The whole point of doing this is to be able to hang out together. So let us know you're here. Remember, if you would like your name to show up in Facebook, you do have to give StreamYard permission. There should be a link above the live in the description. So have a look at that. And let us know, what did you think about this Monday's conversation? If you were there, if you've gone back and listened to the podcast, can you let go of the control of where you end up in your art, whether that is the future of your career or the art itself? And just to kind of recap a little bit, I have been lucky enough to interview a couple of artists who talked about their process. And unlike myself, who tend to picture a finished piece from the beginning, and I'm trying to create the thing I see in my head, they like to put all of the elements together without the expectation of a specific finished product and then allow for good things to happen in that situation so that they don't either disappoint themselves, but also so that they have the kind of excitement of creation and surprise happening. And I'm really enchanted with that idea. It sounds very kind of romantic and like meditative to me, whereas I'm like, I want to control every little detail. And that can be hectic and stressful, but that can also include your life as an artist, right? Do you have an end goal for yourself? Is it to have a 6-figure or 7-figure business? Is it to take off and live in Puerto Rico and do sand paintings? Like what do you know? I don't know. What do you want to do with yourself? Do you have to have that thing, or are you okay with just going in the general direction and being happy every day? And how much control do you have to get there? I don't know. I want to hear what you guys think. If you're in the audience today and you have thoughts about how much control do we have or should we have as artists, we want to hear from you. Matt, Bassam, Becca. I know Becca already mentioned that she's been haunted this week by it, but what do you guys think after we had that conversation and you've had some time to, mull things over a little bit?
Oh, don't let us stop you, Becca. Please.
Where do we start?
I thought everybody just needed a moment to recover from me, like vomiting words really super fast for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, when I say I've been haunted by it, it just, I don't know, it just was so topical for me, like this week, in which I feel like I have very little control over anything at all. And I want to be adaptable. I mean, that's the philosophy I hold for myself, is I want to roll with the punches. I want to just, make the best of whatever's going on. And I am not feeling that way right now. But I'm trying anyway. And so that was my haunted feeling in regards to that conversation. But it's an active process to try to remain not even optimistic, but pleasantly realistic, I suppose, instead of cynical about those things that we can't control. And like having to check myself, like if I find myself getting frustrated when I do not have the control I want, like I can't let that stop me from making any actual forward movement, which is really what I kind of just want to default to doing today. But that's not life. I did think it was interesting though, just in your initial kind of intro, specifying the difference in the control between, you know, life and goals and whatever, and how those relate to art, and then the control within the art itself. And I'm a little curious, like, you'd never find yourself relinquishing that control in the process, Nicole, since you mentioned just your own experience?
So yeah, I definitely do. So I tend to, I guess, work in stages. Initially, I have an idea for an image, and before I ever take the image, I've been fiddling with it in my head. I've been composing it and recomposing it. I've been thinking about angles and color palette and all that kind of stuff. And usually I have a relatively strong image in my head that I can kind of sketch out a little bit. I know where I want it to go. So I do everything up until that point with that image in mind. I make my set with that image in mind. I do the costume design with that image in mind. I select the time of day and the light setup and all of that stuff. So when I go to make the image, I've kind of tried to control as much as possible so that I can get the shot that's in my head or the painting that's in my head or whatever. Once I have that, I am open to whatever happens, you know, creatively at the time. So there have actually been several times where I've been photographing, and for whatever reason, the natural light in that area, I just like it better than the light that I have planned, and I turn off all my lights and I go with that. There have been times where, you know, a makeup artist has made a suggestion, or there happens to be a prop on set, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're going to change everything. So I absolutely do that, but that's not how I go into a shoot. I don't go in with the intent to just let something good happen. I absolutely go in with the intent to get whatever's in my head. And then usually I'll just continue going after that and continue capturing things. And I love I shouldn't say never. Every now and then we will just do shoots where it's like, let's just get together and make something fun, and we'll grab, you know, I have a whole prop closet and we'll just grab stuff and throw it and make cool stuff. Some of my favorite images have been made that way. But for the other stuff, it's definitely a birthing process. It's like, this is in there, needs to come out, and then everything serves that goal.
Totally. That's something that's so interesting to me about photography, like looking at the creative process from different mediums, right? So like when I go into something that's more illustrative, I mean, I start the same way. It's like I see the thing in my head, then I need to go make the thing. And I do find ways to introduce some of that randomosity, I suppose, into illustration, but it's so very different than the process of like being on set with a full creative team, right? Like I love that energy. I absolutely feed off that energy of working with other people, which is entirely different than working alone here in my office. But I love that when the makeup artist has a suggestion, or just the way that the model carries themselves, or the way that the light is falling. Like, it's just such a magical creative experience that I haven't had it outside of anything that involves a camera, just because you don't have that kind of hive mind of creative input. And I think it's so cool to have all those different inputs on set at once.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm very enchanted by people who that is their process, where they're like, I have a general idea, but wherever it goes from there, it's what it's going to be. And I'll just be happy if I get something cool. And I'm like, you're so amazing. I don't understand your brain, but I love it. Like, I want to have that, because it seems much less stressful than the way that I do things.
So
I did a shoot. I did a shoot this morning, personal branding shoot, where I went in and I had charged batteries and empty cards. I made sure that the client showed up, and that was about the plan that I had going into it. And I used to try to control so much of the shoot, like the light's going to be exactly like this. And I had, everything written out and what my lighting setups were going to be, and try to control it. Never did I ever follow one of those plans. And I used to spend a lot of time on these plans. I'd go in and I'd have them on my, my little legal pads, and I'd be like, okay, we're going to do the first setup. It's going to be white, it's going to be natural light, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be that. Gone. Just forget about it. Like, yeah, 30 seconds in, I was just like, the light sucks. So let's not do this. Let's do this completely different concept down here. And there's a lot of that I've actually come to learn to love, because one, it sets my expectations for myself very, very low. So I can just kind of like run up and hurdle that. But I think the downside is that it doesn't keep me mastering the craft, right? Really like honing in on the details for more complex shots or more complex lighting. Because I'm moving so quickly and free forming a lot of things, you do get wonderful shots. You get great connection and great emotion. And, you know, a lot of times serviceable light. But it doesn't have that same thing that when I see a truly produced, controlled shot, I'm like, oh, there it is. That's how you do it. So, Nicole, as much as you're saying, like, I'd love a brain like that, I'd love to turn around and say, for the 10,000 personal branding photos I shoot, I want one of yours in the desert. You know what I mean? So I think it's all a matter of perspective and the craft that we shoot in, how we approach it. I don't do what you do. I do much more retail photography. And so I don't necessarily have the luxury of going in and doing complex sets. It's more the business. But I find that I also carry that into my personal work too. And it's kind of a bad habit where I need to have a little bit more control. So I kind of straddle this weird line in the everyday. I give up a lot of the control, like whatever, as long as I survive the shoot. But if
Still alive.
You know, if I'm doing my own personal work, I feel like I should be paying more attention to a lot of those details, and I don't. And I think I'm missing an opportunity to do that and build those muscles. Not saying I have to use them all the time, but it gives me a chance to build them. You know what I mean?
I can tell Becca was having thoughts there. I just want to share really quickly, Sharon, responding to that initial question, which is for her, many times the best images or the images she feels most connected to are the images that were created spontaneously, have done some shoots with a specific look in mind, and then the model does something completely out of the blue and she falls in love with it, and that becomes the it image. And I know lots of photographers who absolutely have that experience.
See, the more I listen to you guys, especially early on, Nicole, the more I see the end goal really driving the degree of control that you have in the process. It's really about the intent, right? So if your intention is to, when you described how you see a picture in your head and you want to replicate it, right?
Yeah.
Well, you have a very specific goal. It reminds me of Nina when you had your podcast or your interview with Nina. Nina has this amazing ability, and there's actually a medical term or a name for that. I can't remember what it is. To be able to see things so clearly in your mind that they actually appear as if they are real. And she goes and she actually executes exactly on that. So I think the intent is really may constrict or may drive how much focus you are in terms of keeping control of the process. Right. So when we go into a shoot, and I'm like Matt, I don't go into a shoot with specific images in mind. I go into a shoot with the intent of maximizing the variety of shoot, the variety, the choice for the client, and with the intention of getting the results I am used to getting through with my experience and with all the shoots I've done, which I know will serve the purpose of having enough of an offering for the client for them to make a nice purchase, right? So that's my intent. Therefore, I don't feel I'm controlling the images as much as I'm controlling the rigor and discipline that I put into my photo shoots, right? Without really worrying about the outcome. As opposed to if I want to produce a specific image for this month's Artist Forge challenge, then I would be a lot more, I guess, controlled in how I approach it. So really, it's all about intent, and I think they are related. If you're very detailed in what you want as an outcome, you're probably going to be very controlling in terms of the process, or as much control as you can.
So that was my question, kind of related. My question to Matt, which then Bassam you touched on, is the intent. And I'm curious, when you say you'd like, one image of Nicole's from the desert in your book, and you'd like to stretch those muscles, like, why? Just to have those skills in the tool belt, or why? Like, because there are so many utterly fantastic photographs that have had zero prep, zero intent, anything except for capturing a single moment, whether that's in studio or whether it's, out of journalism, whatever it is. So I'm curious about the why.
So you've seen my work, huh?
Yes.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah, It's to build that. It's to give myself more freedom when I do go in to do my work, right? If I can discipline myself enough to get that one shot, right? The things that I learn doing that help me down the road. If I learn how to use a different type of saw or a different type of tool in a wood shop, doesn't mean I have to use that for everything, but that one time that I need it, I'll have the knowledge there to be able to do it. And I look at it kind of the same way with photography, right? So whether it's composite work or 3D work or just real shallow depth of field or hard light, whatever it might be, if I can practice those things here and there, it just gives me more variety in my normal everyday shoots. So if I'm not pushing myself to learn those things, though, I personally get very lazy and will just kind of fall into the same thing and then realize I'm not producing anything that makes me feel good. And so if I'm not constantly learning, constantly adding in, like this morning before my shoot, I knew she wanted a green background. She has this kind of reddish hair, green eyes, green background. I started playing with gels at 8:30 this morning. I've never shot with gels. So I said, let's throw this into the mix. What harm can it do? And so I started throwing in gels, quickly realized I suck at this. And it's not the time to start playing like that. Learn how to use them in the way that I want to use them, then apply them to a shoot. Don't try to go in there and roll with it. So it was just that kind of thing. I realized quickly, I got to shore up that side of my photography craft. Does that answer it?
Yeah. I maybe broader question then, an everybody question. So I wonder when we do focus on like learning these certain new skill sets, particularly when it comes to things like a lot of control and like really extensive design, I wonder in what way does it ever take away from us, kind of back to Nicole's feeling of like, I want to have a little bit more of that creative freedom. I want to be able to relinquish that control and not feel trapped in it. And so like Sharon says in the comments as well, that I find that if I focus too much on getting the image I'm planning for, I'm disappointed when it doesn't turn out. I feel that deeply in my soul, Sharon. So I wonder, like I've learned that through my own kind of growth through photography in particular, starting with that interest in things like street photography and photojournalism and not having any sense of control. And then once I introduced that really, really complex design and focusing on my lighting and my set design and my costume design and like the creation of character and world building, I wasn't so instantaneously inspired. I wasn't able to turn on a dime in the same way that I could otherwise. And I wonder if there is harm in focusing too much on looking for that control if we don't necessarily need it.
I definitely have thoughts.
Tell me.
I will. So I think it's really just a question of muscles. Sure. When I was first shooting and I was shooting weddings and anything that anybody would hire me for, essentially, I was shooting. And so oftentimes, of course, like you do because you should, if I could go scout the wedding location and know what I was looking at and what times of day, all that kind of stuff, I did. I needed, as much information as I could get. So I knew what I needed to bring and where was going to be a good place for formals and all that kind of stuff. When I was shooting that way, I had instincts that would kick in on a dime. I knew what I needed to do to pose people, to get them to look right or to look comfortable, all of that kind of stuff. If I needed to translate that, being able to work with non-models on, posing or anything, I was good with that. And that translated to my studio work as well. So if I had a client come in, I could pose them and have different things happening and get everything ready. It's not like my posing skills aren't still strong, but once I started working with models who do this for a living, and once I started working with, my goal is to get a hero shot. So unlike Bassam, where I'm shooting, he's shooting for as much variety as he can to give his clients a lot to choose from and purchase, I have one thing I want. Everything else I get is extraneous and it's a good thing to have, but I want a hero shot. I'm after one specific piece of art that's in my head. And so once that is done, everything else is a bonus. And I'm working with people who have that skill. So a lot of that kind of initial being able to pose people who are not models is muscle memory in a way that has atrophied a little bit. And so in order to get that back, I have to purposefully do that. It's not like it's gone. It just doesn't come to me as readily as it used to. So for me, that it's not like it's harm, right? But focusing on a specific skill set does mean that the other things kind of atrophy a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I felt that same thing with models. They spoil us.
They do. They do. And I don't care.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's a gift.
It is. But I think that kind of plays into what we're going to, when we start looking at images in a moment, it kind of plays into this because the conversation is around transformation, right? And how, Matt, if you were to start making highly produced images, that would be kind of a transformation of your skill set, and of course broadening of your skill set, but it absolutely changes the way you think, because now instead of going, what can I do with what I have, you're thinking, I know I've done this before, I'm going to do it again, you guys will have to forgive me, but I've likened it to the way that the two sides of the spectrum of how novelists work. On one side of the spectrum, you have what is called a pantser, which is essentially they're writing by the seat of their pants. They are writing as it comes to them, and they haven't done any pre-planning. They have maybe an idea of where they want the story to go, but they don't know what's going to happen or what characters are going to appear or what plot points are going to happen. On the other side of the spectrum, you have plotters, who are people who plan everything in advance. They know every character, when they're going to be introduced, what their character arc is going to be, all of that stuff. Of course, since it is a spectrum, there's people in the middle. But in one side, the plotters are doing all the work on the front end. They're picturing everything in advance. On the other side, the pantsers, are doing everything on the back side. So they get everything done, and then they go, now I need to go fix all of the stuff that I didn't know what to do with in the first place. And I think of it the same way with the two people who approach photography in particular this way. Is for some of us, we have done all the work up here already, and everything else is a formality. Whereas on the other side, when you're reacting to the situation, you are making it up as you go along, and you may have to make adjustments at the time, or you may even have to make adjustments in post, but that creative work is happening in real time rather than, beforehand. So it's like front end work or back end work, but it's at the end, you're still doing the same amount of work. It's just put in different places. At least it seems like that to me.
Do you want me to connect it to something else we spoke about?
Yes.
It's kind of like the AI conversation we had last Friday, where, I'm bringing you back into that, Becca. Do you remember Friday?
I don't remember what day it is. I don't know.
I don't remember what day it is. But in terms of the amount of upfront work you put into your description of what you want AI to produce, right? Versus just putting in a few random characters and liking that end result, whatever it might be, right? Pugs eating lasagna or whatever, I think when you look at it in that respect, all right, that's how I'm likening it to some of the conversations, is you can either do the upfront work or just produce something and then see if it fits, and then start to model some of your words after that. So you're doing it on the back end rather than the front end. So it's me a pantser.
Yep. Yeah, I was actually thinking that same thing, Matt, while Becca was talking. I was thinking, oh man, she mentioned how sometimes the spontaneity is, and that creative energy that you get from having multiple input sources while you're making something tends to be gone when you're illustrating. And that, I found that to be true as well. But I think that's one of the cool avenues AI gives us, is that you can go, I've made 5 thumbnails. I'm not super happy with any of them. Let me go generate a couple of things and see if something can help spark my, interest, or like kick my creativity into overdrive. And all of a sudden now you have like 5 more ideas, which would be similar to having a makeup artist go, well, what if we put this over here? And then you're like, yeah, that was what we needed. Yeah.
One word you used that I just felt like was so poignant, I suppose, was reacting or reaction, and the ability to react, and that kind of fulfilling that need in whatever pantser or plotter or whatever direction that you particularly take. Sorry, there's a naked child. But I think that's a lot of what that comes down to, is your ability to react. And that is the muscle that I think all artists need to be exercising, is that reactionary one, whatever that may be. I mean, even when illustrating or, building something in 3D or something that doesn't involve other people, and you still have those moments of seeing when something kind of accidentally happens. You put the paint on the canvas and then I like that. I like the way that, how thick that is, or the color that is, or oops, I dropped something, but I like that anyway. And so I do try to bring some of that, again, that kind of, I don't know, randomness, or, you know, ability to react into art. Like I love things like random scatters through Photoshop brushes and things like that, or just trying a bunch of like overlays through different blending modes just to see kind of what happens and then seeing how I feel about it. So it kind of takes that control away from me, even though I am, you know, the one wiggling the mouse at all times. But yeah, I love that that particular word of reaction, I think, is a necessity.
It made me just think of Henri Cartier-Bresson, that idea of the decisive moment. Like there is a moment, there's a hinge point or a tipping point where, and if you've never looked at his black and white photographs, he's kind of the godfather of street photography in a way, but everything is always hinging on a turning point. It's the decisive moment where something either stands or falls, or where the corner turns. And I think that happens also when we're doing what you're talking about and reacting to what's happening. Is there's a moment of decision, like if you don't pick up on that, it's going to pass, and the opportunity to take the image in that direction is gone now. And if you can do both, if you can feel that in the moment and capture it, but then if you end up with that in your image as well, then I think there's something ephemeral you can catch that doesn't seem to happen any other way, I feel like.
But doesn't that come with experience? We talked about muscle memory. Where you're you know, with experience in producing art and creating art, you kind of get it becomes like just natural, right? There's certain things that you do naturally, so that when you come up to those points, those inflection points, those wow moments, you didn't get there by chance. You got there through that experience. And people who may not have the experience, or who have done it enough, may miss those, may not get there, may not be able to take up, take advantage of the opportunities, right? So I like that whole metaphor of muscle memory, right? Even, it is the control. That's what gives you control up to a certain point. And the more control you have over things, that sometimes the more open you are to creating amazing things, right? But the control happens in kind of subconsciously.
Well, it limits the brain power that you have to put into doing a certain thing, and it frees it up to stay creative.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. As you were talking about that, Bassam, it just made me think of a couple of things, and one of them is Frida Kahlo and other artists who do naive art, who don't have a lot of training, but still have an intuition and a taste and an eye toward how they're presenting things. And I was thinking about that because earlier in the day, an author was talking about sometimes our intuition is right. Like sometimes as authors, we don't always have to trust the certain plotting method or the certain type of story arc or the hero's journey or whatever. Sometimes your intuition is taking you in the right direction, and you just have to trust that. And one of the reasons that works is because we have been ingesting stories our whole life and many different forms of media, from movies to books. And I think the same thing is true when people say somebody is talented. I think what they're actually referring to is that somebody has ingested so much art that they have formed their taste in such a way that they recognize exactly what you were talking about, Bassam, more quickly than somebody who has not done that in advance. Even if they don't have any training, they've been able to see the world in that way long enough that they've started to build some of that muscle memory or some of that like visual library, so they can see those things. Whereas folks who are maybe coming into art or photography from a different perspective, and they haven't had a chance to do that, maybe haven't developed that taste or that visual library yet in a way where any of the muscle memory is already there. And so because we're attuned to that, they would consider those people, they're like, oh, they're so talented. Well, really, they may have just had more exposure than other people, so that they could start building that taste,
Yeah.
I'm calling myself a naive artist from this point forward, because that was the best description I've ever heard of my entire photography career, is just naive art. Just spray and pray, click and see what happens.
It worked for Frida. Just saying. I mean, maybe not so much in her lifetime, but Of course. Of course. Of course. Jeez.
Yeah.
So that pulls us into being able to look at art together today. So if you have any thoughts on the discussion so far, please feel free to put those in the comments. We want to hear from you. That's the whole point we're together today, is to hear what you think about this idea of control and when we have it and how should we let it go or do we keep it, and what are the benefits and drawbacks of doing either. So we want to hear from you. But as we do, this month, our monthly challenge in the Artist Forge Facebook group is transformation. So we are making art around the theme of transformation, whatever that means to you, and in whatever medium you work, whether that's painting or photography or digital art or sculpture, whatever it is, we want to see your art around the idea of transformation and to kind of get some of our juices running. We are looking at art that is about transformation around that theme. We have made several different selections we're going to be able to look at and jump into those visual literacy skills to try to figure out what these artists have done to help us feel so much. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will look at some examples of art with a theme of transformation and see if we can figure out what's going on. So Becca chose this piece to share, and this is by Titian. So we're going to go ahead and look at this. If you are in the audience today, if you've never joined us for one of these, what we do is we look at the image, we see how it makes us feel, we share our initial feelings, and then we start asking ourselves those visual literacy questions. What has the artist done that left me feeling this way? And that is going to be things like color palette and composition and subject matter and all of that good stuff. We're going to do that. But first, just take a look at the image for a few seconds. How does it make you feel? Share that in the comments. Why is that on there? Oh, sorry, mouse in the wrong place.
Hey, Nicole, can you zoom in and around and just hit some of the detail, please?
Yes, sir. Surely can. We'll start up here.
Oof.
Becca, since this was your submission, do you know this is the proper size of the image? The painting wasn't cut off at all, right?
I was having trouble finding a good picture of it that wasn't like at an angle of it in the frame.
Right.
I don't believe there might be some cut off a little bit. Let's see. But nothing really.
Nothing
notable.
that compromises the composition, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I just looked at a few, and they're pretty much all the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering that because I definitely want to talk about the choices in composition here. But
So I feel confused because I'm trying to figure out why Becca would bring this in under the theme of transformation. That's how confusing this is to me.
If you're in the audience today, how is this image making you feel?
My adrenaline is up. Like, excited.
I feel like this is the tipping point in power. Like it feels like that decisive moment, right? Like everything changes now. This is a thing that happens where everything will be different after this, is how it makes me feel. Also some female empowerment happening here, right?
That's my reaction too, though I suppose I'm biased because I've already seen the painting and I know the story in which it's based off of. But the
which you can share with us later. It's very exciting. So this is called The Death of Actaeon by the painter Titian. And let's so something, and there's definitely some interesting things I want to talk about as far as how this is put together. But if you're in the audience today, this is your last chance to let us know how this image makes you feel before we start diving into the visual literacy part and breaking it down. So we want to get your honest and unbiased feelings before we bias them by giving you more context for the image. There's so much happening. Okay, go ahead and give us some backstory here, Becca.
Okay, well, first off, Titian's one of my favorite Renaissance painters. So I love you, Titian, wherever you are, dead in the ground. Anyway, I love the story this is based on. So this is a depiction of the goddess Artemis or Diana and the death of Actaeon, who... And what happened is this hunter is going through the woods and he stumbles upon the goddess and her nymphs or her goddess friends or whatever bathing in these pools in the woods. And Artemis's big thing is that she's the virgin goddess of the hunt. And so she then goes forward upon noticing him and transforms him into a stag. And in this painting in particular, you can see him kind of off to that the right-hand side, not fully transformed yet. He has the head of a stag, but still the body of a man. And then his hunting dogs turn on him and eat him alive. So
that's his own. That's his own hunting dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I have many reasons for finding this particular depiction of transformation very interesting compared to a lot of others. Whether in art or in history and mythology. But it's just, I loved this story. Like the first time I heard it, like 9 years old and, grade school, like studying Greek myths. And I was like, I want to be her. And I want to turn men who are creepy into stags and watch them get eaten. So anyway.
Which is fine. It's fine.
It is.
I was
feel like
watching Bugs Bunny at 9.
Yeah, that was earlier. That's kindergarten. Come on now. But I feel like a lot of that power dynamic is very, very well depicted in this painting in particular. And I can wait on that and hear your guys' thoughts now with a little more context.
So now you know, Bassam, why she chose this as for transformation.
Absolutely.
So what are your thoughts there after getting a little more context for the image?
Well, I mean, now that it is much clearer to me. It really is much clearer. Even when you described it yourself, how you saw it, Nicole, it became much clearer to me that it is in the theme of transformation. I mean, I love the image for the visual aspect of it, right? I don't have any connection to the story exactly, but I love the image. It just speaks to me in terms of color, the color tones, I'm trying to figure out this. You talked about she's a virgin goddess of hunt, and I'm trying to figure out the significance of the breast showing in that actual scene. What's the significance of the breast showing? Because I think it would have had the same impact had the breast not been out. Right. Any thoughts on that, or any?
I think it's just lending context to the story. She was nude, bathing in this pool in the forest. So it's this moment, if we're going to lean back on Mr. Cartier-Bresson for a moment, that decisive moment in her redressing and drawing her own bow to end the life of this voyeur.
But that's if you know the backstory. If you know the story, if you don't know the story and you're just looking on the image, you don't have a clue what happened before. It's hard to see that she was, he came upon them bathing in the water, bathing nude in the water. Right?
I think from my perspective, so there's a lot of things that I love to break down from this image visually. One of them is the fact that she's wearing pink, which is really interesting because for a long time, pink was a boy's color. Pink was not a girl's color. Girls wore blue, baby blue. It was considered a softer, gentler color. Pink as a declension of red, which was a very much the color of power and passion, right? And so there were certain colors that girls just tended not to wear that were kind of reserved for boys and men. So really interesting to me, first of all, that she's wearing pink. Second of all, the way that the image is put together, I love the fact that everything is nearly monochromatic and the contrast is really similar except for on her and the cloudy sky. So like this is all relatively difficult to read, right? Like it's very much a confusion. The tonality of the colors are similar. The contrast is really similar between Actaeon, the dogs, the trees, everything that's going on over here is a little bit of a muddled mess, but she is very bright and her colors are much stronger. The contrast is much stronger, all of that. And then of course we have a cloudy sky. So there's like kind of angry storm clouds happening in the sky. The water is even like moving. It's not placid water, right? So there's all of this forward momentum happening. The fact that she's coming from off screen per se is also a really interesting, a really cool dynamic choice to make for a piece of composition, because today as photographers we would not be able to get away with this, right? Like if you were to put this image in competition, they would be like, you can't do that. And yet we have the whole reason for it here, like the break in the rules of composition is adding this really dynamic, like she's coming off screen, from off screen to like take shit over, which is fantastic to me. Her hair's not even messed up. And I think also the showing of the breasts there is partly, this is an homage to the male gaze as well, right? Like there's something in the losing of power that can also be incredibly erotic, like having a woman overpower the situation. But also she would not have had, I should say, anything to be ashamed of in her nude body aside from a man using her nude body for his own pleasure without her permission, right? So there's almost a reclamation of power in the fact that her breast is out and she's committing murder. And so I think those things kind of all play together for me when I see this image, and the question of the breast being out, but everything as a whole. I'm sorry if I
saw it a little bit differently. I saw, a guy walking his dogs in the woods, happens upon a girl making content for her OnlyFans channel, and then he gets taken out for it. And it's really, it was kind of a harsh punishment for just a walk in the woods. So I dig the photo, not really keen on the concept, but yeah, I don't know. It was such an eloquent thing, Nicole. I had to bring the standard of this webinar just way down. So that was all.
It was fantastic. Oh God.
What's next?
Yeah.
All right, if I may, to clean up Matt's disgusting input for a moment. So what I love about this in particular is I feel like it would have been a very easy kind of compositional contextual choice to put the focus on Actaeon and his transformation. And there's lots of other art that depicts him actively transforming into the stag and him being the focal point, him really being the subject of the image, which is not the case here. And as Nicole already mentioned, like it's so muddled. It's like you almost wouldn't even see it unless you're looking for it, right? And I love that. I love how much that empowers our goddess Artemis, because it's so much in myth and story, right? Like the woman is the one transformed, whether it's by falling in love or, I don't know, being transformed into Medusa or a monster or the evil old crone or whatever it is. And that is not the case here. The transformation is upon the man that harms her and not upon her. And she instead is the hero in the shot while he falls to the background and is forgotten. And I love that. I love that. It's so different than so much of their art. And I just thought that stood out a lot.
Especially for the time period that this was made in, right?
Absolutely.
Like
yes.
Women were, you're a virgin or whore, right? And everything was painted by men. Like all of the art, that we have at this time is very much painted by men. And so for a man to paint a piece like this, where the female is the powerful center and the male who's, it really is kind of his story, right? Like it happened to him as a kind of a parable, I guess, in a way, like for people to learn something about this is what happens to you. But anyway, to have her be the centerpiece in a time also when men were making the art is also kind of a little countercultural.
Totally. I love it. Sorry, Matt. I'm going to go film for my OnlyFans now.
As Lizzo would say, it's about damn time.
Well, I
I
definitely feel more cultured today than I did this morning. Than I did this morning. Thank you, Becca.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Pratik thought it was funny. That's all we needed.
Hey, Pratik. Nice to see you, my friend.
Always love to have him with us. Okay, so we're going to look at another piece. This is one of my favorites that I never understood when I first saw it. It took me a long time to understand.
Okay, so I don't feel so bad
at all. This is one of those ones. So if you're in the audience today, have a look at this image for a few seconds. Think about how it makes you feel. Share that in the comments. We are going to do the same thing. I will go ahead and also zoom in so we can look at a little more detail in the line work and the tones. As you can see, the name of this is Nude Descending a Staircase.
Okay.
So whenever you have some feelings you're willing to share, now is the time. Friends in the audience, we want to hear from you. Don't leave us hanging.
I feel drunk, and that's not even the fault of actually drinking. That's the fault of the painting.
You know, it's a hard one, isn't it?
It's very hard. All I can think of is the lineup of soldiers in Star Wars. What's their name? The white.
The stormtroopers.
Yeah. Like I don't see where you. Yeah. And it makes me think of origami and paper mache.
So this got me feeling heavy in the chest. Feel like I'm breathing in smoke. Like it feels like this smoky thing around me, cloud, right? So it has these tones and this feel and this chaos that's just kind of making me feel. It's not really anxious. It's more unhealthy. And like this is not going to be good for me. And that's rare that I ever say something like that.
That's interesting. Wow.
Having thoughts about Matt being afraid of nudes descending his stairs now.
This looks like a hell of a descent. This doesn't look like just a voluntary descent. This looks like there was assistance to it.
So, friends in the audience, what are you thinking? How's this image making you feel? This is a hard one for me because I actually really love this, in part because it was one of the first images I ever saw that was revelatory for me once I understood what was happening. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't see this. Sharon saying, I feel on edge, but I want to keep looking and trying to figure it out. So this image called Nude Descending the Staircase is by Marcel Duchamp, which is also the guy who did the urinal. Everybody always remembers the urinal as the kind of...
The fountain.
The fountain. But this piece is at the end of Cubism, essentially. And so what this actually is a nude figure walking down a staircase. Imagine shutter drag, and that's what this is. So this is the nude figure in several different positions as it descends a staircase, which you can kind of begin to see the shape of here. Here's some of the stairs in the back, so the staircase winds around. And this is the nude figure in multiple different stages descending the staircase, you can even kind of get an idea of hip position here and leg position. And there's some motion lines that are included in there as well. And I chose this one for transformation in part because obviously Cubism being such a transformational style of art at the time period that really took us from going, art needs to be pretty, and kind of stripping away the veneer of prettiness to kind of the shape and the texture beneath, but also for the fact that what we're seeing is transitional shapes, right? So these kind of transitional shapes as the body moves and the shapes change, and there's transformation in that, from being at the top of the stairs to the bottom of the stairs, from being weighted on a left foot to weighted on the right foot, and how your body shifts and changes, and then the very careful delineation of shape, and then also color and tone. It's incredibly subtle. So yeah, that was why I chose this image. And I know that this is a hard one to read, but when I mentioned that this was the first one that had me, that was revelatory, was when I first saw it, I saw it with no context. And then I learned the name of the painting and I was like, oh, it is obviously, like, oh, that's, now I can see it. It's a dude walking downstairs. Like, it made perfect sense. And then the more that I looked at it and realized what the aim was for this, it's one of those that I just can't stop staring at anytime it's up. I want to keep picking it apart, even though I know what it is. I can't seem to stop going like, oh, here's head and there's the hip. And
it's a gorgeous image, and I would absolutely stare at this for hours, right? And just trying to decipher all of that stuff. I do like that it was run through Infinite Color Panel for the toning and the color, but you know, we all have to use tools. So
it might even have been some Infinite Unify happening in there, right? Like that skin tone.
That's what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, very unified.
No, but it's gorgeous. Can you do me a favor and can you just zoom in on the center and those white dots? That's the only thing that's distracting me.
Those seem to be added on. They're like dotted lines.
And I understand that it's probably just added parts of the motion or a bobble or something that was being tracked, right? As a slow shutter, you know, thought of it. But I couldn't really tell if it was anything other than that or if it was supposed to be guiding my eye somewhere. But thanks. I couldn't really see it clearly before. So.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no problem. I believe so. For me, for some reason, I always, whenever I see those dots, it reminds me, I think of like the elbow twisting. I don't know why. It just feels like an elbow twist line to me. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what it feels like. Excuse me.
It's the most
very carbonated.
Most untraditional representation of nudity I've ever seen. I mean, I still don't see nudity.
Hold my beer. Sorry.
I was thinking a little bit because I was looking at some artwork by Duchamp earlier as well, and I was looking at more of his ready-made art, like the fountain or the bicycle wheel and stuff like that. And I was kind of like thinking over this concept that all art is transformative in representation, which is maybe kind of super Platonist of me. But I was thinking about that, and I feel like Duchamp does this very well, where he takes these objects that could be or are recognizable depending on his certain work of art, and he transforms them and puts them in a context that makes very little sense on first view. And I just, in general, as an artist, I just find his work very, very interesting, like whether it is sculptural, whether it is painted. And he continues this same theme of transformation of a realistic objects and takes it from being representational into something completely conceptual very, very well.
I would agree. I think, which is why this piece is so cool. So Stephanie, I think it's Stephanie. Yes, it is Stephanie. And yep. Okay. Stephanie said, it makes me feel like I'm breaking free of something, which I think is such a cool reaction to this image and interesting too. I mean, you can always read into it, but interesting that the nude is descending and not ascending, right? I mean, there's something potentially interesting to be read into that too, if you choose to go that far. So that is 2 super cool images so far. We're going to go ahead and look at these 2 really quickly, and fun to have a photograph. And then there's one more we can look at depending on what our time is looking like. But Becca, you want to tell us a little bit about these?
Sure. These are 2 photographs of an artwork called Splitting by Gordon Matta Clark. I find his art profoundly fascinating. It's unlike anything really that I've ever seen. And so this house was scheduled for demolition. And so he went and he took a chainsaw and he sawed a split into the house. And then weeks or months later, it was demolished. And that is the artwork.
So remember, we're looking at these pieces, transformation being the theme. I'm going to give everybody a few seconds just to kind of gather their feelings and then go ahead and share what you think. I definitely have some thoughts.
And just for context, the photographs are not the artwork. The house itself is the artwork. So compositionally or anything irrelevant. The photos are just for documenting the creation.
I disagree. Death of the artist. The photos are art now.
Yeah, no, they're super cool. But just they're not positioned as a dictate or anything, you know.
Right. The artist didn't make the photographs as the art. Right. Yeah. The house is the art.
Yeah, once again, I'm very uneasy. Yep. There's so much to talk about here, but I'll save that. But yeah.
No, don't save it.
Oh, I was just saying, like, as soon as I saw it, it was immediately for me a representation of people, right? And just as they get withered and old, minds start to split apart. There's a whole mental health part of this that I really like. Besides the fact that I just want to run my healing tool right down the middle and just close everything up with content aware. There's so much in this that just feels like my brain, right? And half the time my brain feels like it's splitting apart, right? Pulled too many ways or just kind of falling apart on a daily basis. And there was just something about this that really struck me. And it wasn't just the split. It was the little details. It was the lack of interior. It was the shingles falling off. It was the weathered paint on the railing. There's just so much other decay in this besides just the split, the peeling ceiling, right? All the rhymes that I come up with, all the things, just all of those elements in combination with the interior and the exterior, really just make me feel uneasy. It's almost like it's too close, too soon, you know?
Yeah.
It's that feeling. It just hits a little bit too close to home for me.
I don't want to explore that. I don't want to explore that feeling. I think this is Stephanie again saying the outside makes me feel detached. The inside makes me feel like I want to bring things back together. And Sharon saying I get a sense of the family structure falling apart. Interesting choice of words there too, falling apart, considering that this was very purposefully hacked into 2 pieces, right?
Say it, Bassam.
I find it an interesting. I mean, you said the house was destined for demolition, and if you think of that house just falling down, it's a lot different than that house splitting apart and opening up. So there's kind of a rebirth, especially looking at it from the inside. This specific picture here, and kind of seeing the light as you crack an egg, you open it this way, right? And something comes out of it. So just the fact that the demolition, instead of being just destruction, it's actually opening up into something new, and that concept of rebirth. That's what I see.
That is a really cool way to think of it.
Damn, that's like the most positive interpretation I've ever seen of his work. Well done, Bassam.
It's, I mean, I can see where that as you're describing that, I can 100% see it. I mean, and that's a really cool legacy when you think about it, to say, here's this thing destined for demolition. I have rebirthed it into an art, right? And there's something in the fact that it's a transitory piece of art as well, that it doesn't get to last, that it is going away, which is one of the things that, Banksy's self-destroying piece of art, and then also the stupid banana on the wall, something that is transitory, that is not going to be there, that is meant to be gone. It's very much the cherry blossoms, right? The celebration of the cherry blossoms, this interesting thing, or this beauty that lasts only for a minute. And part of the reason it's so compelling is because it can't last. So I can absolutely see considering something like this that way.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I think without this, go ahead, Becca.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think essentially that same sort of concept, but put less articulately and beautifully, is kind of what makes this particular artist so interesting to me. He does give new life to these buildings and these structures that otherwise would just, be decrepit and die. And he does kind of put that focal point on, like, yes, this is the decay of this family, or the decay of this structure, or the decay of the American suburb. But he is giving them new life. And I do like that take, in that he lets them have a moment in the spotlight before they're gone.
Yeah. Ooh, I really like that, because nobody would have paid attention to this derelict old house. Nobody would have noticed it for anything other than passing it on the street before it's demolished. And now somebody has used it to say something. And even if the message itself is the degradation of the American family, or the instability of our institutions, right? Like the nuclear family, the instability of the institutions that we've built our lives upon, because that's really a symbol, like something a house symbolizes, right? Is the safety and the togetherness of the home and the protection of the family and all of those things. And here we've split one right down the middle. And not even, it's not even messy, right? It's clean, it's purposeful, it's very much cut in half. It's not like things have slowly fallen apart over time. Somebody was like, hey, yeah. So, like, even though that is the message, the fact that it's been done to this thing does now really give it a longevity that it would never have had otherwise.
Yeah. So one thing that I read about this work, so I can't take credit for this concept, but was that the cleanliness of that cut allowed the light to pass through and document time like a sundial in a very particular way versus, the diffuse spread of light, say, through a window. And I found that super cool. Like, it allows the passage of time and the end of time, the end of a day, and the end of this house to be documented in a very visual and natural way, which I thought was very interesting.
For sure. Ugh, I love art. Okay, we have one last thing to look at today. This is a piece that I chose. No, I can't push the right buttons. I don't know buttons. So we'll go ahead and take a minute to have a look at this one, share how this image makes us feel, and then we will try to break it down a little bit. So if you were in the audience today, remember we're looking at images with a theme of transformation, because that is the June challenge for the Artist Forge. We're creating art around the theme of transformation. So have a look at this, see how it makes you feel, share that in the comments.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I know I've looked at this before. Was it originally in color, like presented to the public in
Yes.
color? Yeah.
And that was wrong. But I don't think I realized it at first. I think it's Kate Woodman's fault.
Damn you, Kate Woodman.
Damn you. I'll go ahead and do a zoom. Oops. So we can see some details here. All right.
I get a feeling the Incredible Hulk is gonna emerge on the other side. Just
I was at a Dead and Company show and I saw a guy blow a smoke ring just like this. It's crazy.
but the word powerful comes to mind just based on that. Like there's so much power in this image. Force. Intensity. Bikini line.
Is it a photograph or is it a painting or a drawing or an illustration or
It is a photograph.
It is a photograph. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything that's in the photo was in camera. If you are in the audience today and this image is making you feel something, please share that in the comments.
I'm still feeling this theme of girl power. Like there is so much feminine energy here.
Yeah, and when I said power, I had that in mind, by the way. Yes.
I'm also very much appreciating what I believe are stretch marks on her hips.
Yes, they are.
I love that.
Tiger stripes got to stay. Our audience is quiet today. It's no fun if you guys don't play along. Come on.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with this. And not in any sort of bad way. I keep vacillating between feelings in terms of like it's mysterious and edgy and mystical, but at the same time, kind of that warm, feminine, intimate feeling. And then, with the smoke the way it is, in the light, the smoke doesn't feel as oppressive as it did in the feeling that I got with the nude descending the staircase. So it's a weird thing. I think it's the lighting of it, and it feels for me like I'm much safer as opposed to uneasy in the last one. I feel safer with this, and I think it's that God light. I think it's the backlight, over behind her arm that makes me feel like, oh, this is something I'm supposed to be seeing emerging from this smoke. I'm okay with this, right? That's kind of the feeling, in a short 15,000 word sentence.
That's super interesting too, because you mentioned that painting feeling smoky, the nude descending the staircase, and here it is, literally a nude human body accurately represented in smoke, and yet the feeling is so different. That's fascinating.
I'm not a good art critic, Becca, in any way, shape, or form. Naive artist, remember the whole thing?
I mean, for a naive artist, your read's pretty dang good.
I mean, that's kind of the fun of it, is you don't have to really know shit about shit, and you can still have it.
I made a career out of it.
People do it. So
I want to know more about the removal of the
What's
color.
the backstory here?
Yeah.
Well, I hesitate to give the backstory yet because I would love to hear before I go and squash everybody's thoughts with artist intent. I would love to hear kind of what the reads are so that I don't kind of ruin anybody's.
This is your image,
impressions.
Nicole?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I just clicked. Yeah.
Yep, it's from a series.
Oh, well, now that's different. Okay.
There's no plants growing out of it, so we're a little.
I know,
No,
so you never know.
No tree growing, yeah.
There's a mushroom somewhere.
Somewhere, right there they are, right there.
I'm still very curious about the color, but I feel like the I don't know, something about what is presented of the body, particularly the roundness in the hips and the leg, and I just feel like something about that again gives me very, very feminine. I feel like it would be a very different image if it were a man, or just a male presenting body, or if it was angled even differently in a more androgynous kind of way. I feel like there is this, again, also knowing it's you and finding these themes of kind of motherhood and birth and reimagining oneself. I am getting that big time here, particularly through that lower body. And it hurts a little bit, that posture in the upper body with the pushing up of the arms and the crane of the neck. I mean, there's a pain to it. So again, kind of giving me maybe motherhood a little bit. Maybe that's just that being so inherently related to the female experience. Getting a little of that, but something coming out, a lot of girl power. But I want to know about the color, Nicole. Why did you take it away?
I will. God. Calm yourself.
I can't.
I will share that.
All right.
Does anybody else have anything they want to share before I tell you about this image? I don't want to ruin it just in case.
I just want you to talk like that the rest of the broadcast.
No man to talk like LSP, my club. All right. So this is a series of images that I took of several different people. This is Michaela. I also photographed 2 men. Everybody in my garage, these poor people were all nude on the floor in December. It was freezing, and I covered them in smoke and photographed them from a ladder. This is one light, and you're absolutely right, Matt. It's coming down from above. So I've positioned it in front to kind of have that fall off toward the bottom of the frame. And also, one light is the best kind of light for any kind of smoky texture to pick up the shape. And then I just have 2 V-flats, white V-flats, just to bounce a little bit back into so we don't lose the shadows. But this, aside from the change in monotone, this is very much what it was like out of camera. And so the inspiration for this came from, I had seen a sculpture called Ex Nihilo by Frederick Hart, and it is above the Washington Cathedral, and it is a series of sculptures of human figures coming up out of water. And when I saw it, it was lit from above. And when I first saw the sculpture, I was like, oh my God, I need to make a photograph of that. I need to photograph that. There were these humans almost being birthed by the water in a way, which is suitable because ex nihilo means from nothing. And so that sculpture was meant to show the creation of man. And that's why it's over the top of the Washington Cathedral, right? It's the God creating man up out of nothing. And when I first saw the sculpture, I thought the water was smoke or clouds. And when I wanted to do an interpretation of that sculpture, I thought to myself, well, the sculpture is from nothing, but where do you go from there? What's the experience like of being created only to be left to your own devices? And how do you reconcile yourself with finding purpose and figuring out who you are? And you're kind of left in nothing in a way, which is why the name of the series is Nusquam, which means nowhere, essentially. And so each of the images that I selected from these have to very much, all of them are figures coming up or emerging from the smoke. And the interpretation is purposefully left to the viewer. But that was the inspiration for the images was, well, what happens once you're created? I mean, you're kind of left to your own devices. Like, here you go, little gingerbread man, go about your business. And how do you figure yourself out? And how do you figure life out? And how do you know who you are, what your purpose is, and find your, goal in life and all of those things. And so the idea of the nude human form being, obviously it's how you come out of the womb, but also it's your most vulnerable and your most precarious position. And then having the smoke that is both concealing and revealing the form and rarely having a face shown as well was really purposeful. But in a way, this is what is pre-transformation, right? Like, this is what happens before you figure out who you're going to become in a way. And the reason the color was removed, Becca, was because initially when I photographed it and I had it in color, it felt like a photograph. And I wanted to pay more attention to the shapes and the light than I wanted to pay attention to the form. I wanted the black and white to allow the form to meld with the smoke a little bit better, because in the color, obviously the color of human skin and fog is two very different things. And this made the figure disappear a little bit more into the fog, and it's a little more sculptural. And so since it was inspired by sculpture that is in marble, it just seemed like a much better fit that also would allow for more interpretation. The color was me pushing an interpretation on it a little bit. So removing that, I felt like allowed it to communicate, or allowed for more interpretation on the part of the viewer.
Yeah, totally. I can definitely see that. It feels more sculptural. I mean, I liked the color and the originals that I saw. There was a beautiful contrast between the skin and the shadow and the smoke. But you're right. The blending of the elements together works very well in black and white in the way the color does not.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like them both, but I feel like for the intention of the set, this works better.
Yeah, totally. Cool.
Yeah.
And just hearing how you created it. Sorry, Becca. Hearing how you created it, being on a ladder, things coming out of the ground, tying it back to the beginning of the conversation, just put something in the bank to try next shoot. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I drew some. I drew some. I'll find them, but I drew some schematics essentially for what I did that I can send you if you ever want to set something up and give it a go. But yeah, super, super simple.
Do you have that series anywhere on your website or anywhere else, or is it just?
So I did have the series up there for a while, but it's so different from most of my work that it kind of tended to throw things off a little bit. I believe that there's still, I think I might still have one of the main selects may still, or I might have removed it. No, I think I did remove it. But one of the reasons I pulled them off, one reason is because one image from this set is actually is going up in a curated set of NFTs that are going to launch relatively soon. The other reason is that I very specifically photographed and edited these to be seen large. They need to be 6 foot by 4 foot, I think, to appreciate what I wanted out of them, to lose the figure in the smoke and also reveal the figure. And I want them to be seen from up close. So I feel in a way like I kind of pulled them down because I want to print them and then have them be seen that way first and then maybe this way later. But I have not found a gallery yet that wants them. So
they're dragging their feet, man. They should want these. They're dope.
Thanks.
I will say they've got to be out there somewhere. So also rewind to the beginning of the conversation. I know, Nicole, you saw I did an AI experiment where I put in Nicole as the prompt, photography by Nicole York. And all of the generations there looked like this set of images to some degree. They all had things coming out of the smoke. And I thought that was so interesting because I recognized it immediately. So
yeah,
impact.
Right. I think these are a little more universal fine art than most of my work, which is very niche. And so it would make sense for something like that to be seen, I think, a little wider. Plus, one of these was my first NFT. It was actually my origin. So it hasn't sold because I priced it high and nobody bought it. And I felt bad about myself, but maybe someday that will change. But I did price it at like 1.8 Ethereum. So that's not an insignificant amount of money. Anyway, all right. So we have seen a lot of images tonight around the theme of transformation, sometimes transformation of a person into a new version of themselves or a different kind of person, from alive to dead, from human to stag. But we've also seen transformation look like physical objects and how those things relate to the transformations that happen in our lives, the growth of families, the decay of society. All of those things are transformation, and seeing them explored in different forms, really super cool. So if you are participating in the June challenge with us in the Artist Forge, hopefully being able to see these different kind of images inspires you a little bit and gets you thinking about the theme of transformation, so you can go make some super cool art and join past winners like Nina Covington and Erica Manning, who are having blog posts done about them, who are having podcast interviews and having their art shared. Hopefully you will come in and put your pieces up as well and let the community see them and love them, and show up in a show just like this at the end of the month, where we use our visual literacy skills to break down pieces of art and figure out how these artists made us feel so much. So thank you for joining us today, Pratik and Stephanie and Sharon and everybody who is here. Super glad Olga was here. It's glad to have you all. Glad that you were with us. Until tomorrow morning, we will be together in the morning on Clubhouse at 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 6 a.m. for the West Coast and 9 a.m. for the East Coast. Afternoon for our friends overseas. We will be talking about transformation in a different way. Transformation where people steal other people's art and try to call it a transformative artwork and make money off of it. And we're going to have a conversation about that. So hopefully you will join us and learn a little bit with us and share your thoughts. Until tomorrow morning, have a fantastic evening. If you have time to make something amazing, do that. And we'll see you guys then. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.